It's me, Dr. Steve. Unfortunately, I'm having a COVID Christmas. I just got the results back, so I'm basically stuck here. But that allows me to serve you more because that's what this channel is all about. And I can think of nothing more wonderful to talk about than how Kari Lake absolutely ended that fraud, corrupt Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, who, of course, because she refused to recuse herself from conducting the Arizona gubernatorial election, was, as a result, in charge of counting her opponent's votes and overseeing a whole host of shenanigans that were, I believe, proved beyond a shadow of doubt in court. As you know, as of yesterday, the Kari Lake team wrapped up 2 days of eyewitness and expert testimony on the outright fraud that took place on Election Day in Maricopa County. Robert Barnes, who's a trial lawyer and followed the whole of the proceedings, I think he summed up Kari Lake's case very well. When all said and done, Kari Lake's team showed first that Maricopa County officials misprinted Election Day ballots, causing mass delays on Election Day, which experts and legal witnesses testified cost Kari Lake the election. And secondly, the records required to certify chain of custody vanished as unaccounted ballots cast election in doubt. So going in reverse order, we found out that Maricopa County officials have a count of all the ballots at the processing center, but not at the original location where the ballots were originally dropped off, as required by Arizona law, by the way. So the problem there is that between transporting ballots from location A, where they're originally dropped off, to location B, where they're counted, there is actually no chain of custody record. We've got an accurate count of the ballots at location B, but not at location A. And so there is no objective verification for determining whether the amount of ballots at location A were the same amount that ended up in location B. In other words, the number of ballots could have been tampered with during their transportation from place A to place B. And again, as I understand it, according to Arizona law, you don't have to show that there was actual tampering. You just have to show that the chain of custody was broken, and therefore there could have been tampering. So it's very much like evidence tampering. The only way evidence is admissible in a court of law is if its chain of custody can be accounted for at every single point of its admission. So you need documentation how the evidence received and where it was stored and who had access to it. If at any point that chain of custody is broken, if there's no record of who or what was involved in the movement of that evidence, it's no longer admissible because it could have been tampered with, right? So the Kari Lake team, I think, proved, ironically, through the admission under oath of the vote recorder of Maricopa County, that there were no records for how many ballots were originally cast at their drop-off centers. So boom, chain of custody broken, and therefore you have hundreds of thousands of ballots that are by definition invalid. And then Kari Lake's legal team found that 48 of the 113 ballots they examined were 19-inch ballots printed on 20-inch paper, which caused them to be rejected by the vote tabulators. And so the size discrepancy is why the tabulators rejected the ballots and why so much chaos ensued on Election Day when a mass number of Kari Lake's voters came out to vote, which, according to polling and legal experts, cost Kari Lake the election. As for Katie Hobbs' team, they were an embarrassment. Again, Robert Barnes summed up their case well. They had two witnesses basically perjure themselves. They had the goal to blame voters for voting on Election Day. They actually claimed their lack of record keeping meant no one could prove that there was any impact on the election, what Barnes calls, you can't prove it because we burnt the evidence, right? Defense. And in the end, they basically demanded the court to treat elections as holy rituals beyond all reproach, beyond any criticism or contestation. And that's exactly, by the way, how the legacy media is treating this. The AP already has a headline out that there were no bombshells at the court proceedings. This was all just a waste of time. In other words, they're warning the judge he better rule rightly or his career is over, right? They're just so patently pathetic, this Zelensky media. They're just ridiculous. What this so-called defense suggests to me is how it reveals how corrupt regimes inevitably corrode from within. The corruption is both the means to their power, but also eventually and inevitably it's the means to their demise. They're so corrupt that they have no defense. And because ideological fidelity, faithfulness to a woke neo-Marxist leftist ideology is their only qualification, they end up amassing people who are often the least qualified to conduct any particular service. And I think you saw that with how that poor excuse for Katie Hobbs' legal team. You could see that they literally had no defense, and they were relying on the unflattering media coverage to intimidate this judge. But eventually, this obvious incompetence ends up eroding their power. Corruption corrupts, and there's no way around that. As far as what the judge is going to rule in this case, of course, we're going to have to see. There appears to be 3 or 4 options. The judge can overturn the election and hand it over to Kari Lake. That has recently happened in an election outside of Orlando, Florida, where a town councilman was removed from office by a judge, and his challenger was put into office after significant fraud was proven. The second option is to order runoff in Maricopa County. So this would, in effect, nullify the results of the election, call for a do-over, as it were. Again, there's ample legal precedent for that as well across the nation. Or the judge can acknowledge that there were clear shenanigans, but not enough to justify overturning the election. And then again, he could ignore all the evidence and allow what objectively was one of the most pathetic defenses imaginable prevail. So we'll see. But regardless, Kari Lake fought back and revealed Katie Hobbs and the Maricopa election establishment to be the corrupt snakes they really are. All right, guys, back to nursing my COVID. Have a beautiful and wonderful Christmas, and I'll try to make some videos as I gather the strength to do so. God bless you.